Welcome back to another reaction and ting. I'm Mr. Giant, and we're getting back into the Crusades. This one is called Rise of Bulgaria. Events leading up to the Sack of Constantinople. Yes, so we're gonna check this one out. Kings and Generals doing it again, man. I'll leave a link in the description to this video. Go check them out, man. Really good storytelling. Gives you a real good picture of history. Anyway, let's go ahead and YouTube and sim and see what this one's all about here.
The stupendous number of rebellions and civil wars that took place within and against the Eastern Roman Empire is now a meme known to any fan of history. But no other period featured as many of them as the late 11th to first half of the 12th centuries. The Byzantines, surrounded by enemies on all sides, suffered constant attacks, and this period affected a profound change in the region that reverberated throughout the centuries. Byzantines, Crusaders, Hungarians, Bulgarians, Serbians, Seljuks, Normans, Cumans, and others entered shaky, ever-shifting alliances and fought an all-out war. Welcome to our series on the events in Anatolia and the Balkans in the late 11th and 12th century, bookmarked by two Byzantine restorations. In this episode, we will set the stage with the beginning of the reign of the Angelos dynasty in the Eastern Roman Empire and the rise of the Second Bulgarian Tsardom. Shout out to Bespoke Post for sponsoring this video and thus supporting our channel. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership bringing you boxes with the best goods from under-the-radar brands. They procured products for more than $38 million from small businesses during the COVID-19 controls and used promo code KingsandGenerals20 at checkout. The Komnenian restoration that started in 1081 by Alexios I Komnenos provided a devastated Eastern Roman Empire still reeling from the defeat at Manzikert the reforms it needed to survive. Three emperors of this dynasty, who ruled for a century, changed the course of history, leading to a cultural, military and territorial expansion, as well as opening the gates for the Crusades that would ultimately undo all of their progress. Alexius I and his son John II knew that one of the most necessary and radical changes was the replacement of the theme system, which, while effective, was extremely expensive to upkeep. The solution to this problem was a new system that was much more feudal and centralized, giving power to the royal family.
See, that's the thing about expansion. When you expand, you sort of gain a bunch of dependents when you expand, because there's people living there. You can't exactly keep them on the strict wraps, you know what I mean? Sooner or later there's going to be a rebellion or something, so you got to watch that. And, you know, growing jealousy to your growing power, you got to deal with that. And what is so alluring about, that? Is it the end? Like I control the world or something like that? Is that what keeps certain people going? I don't know. I don't have any desire to control nobody. I just live and let live, man. Enjoy life. Your stuff don't infringe on my stuff, and we cool to go. No, there's no fight, no fuss. We chilling. But some of us have that urge to want to control everything. You know what I mean? So then we start trying to control everything, mess everything up, cause civil strife and wars and stuff like that. It's crazy, ain't it?
Only the emperor could hand out the titles required for one to become a landowner, pronoi, who then had to supply Constantinople with taxes and manpower. In a very short span, the local aristocracy declined in favor of the extended royal family, which received most of the titles and land. The competition was fierce, and the entire system relied on a capable ruler who could rein in his family, with the result being a cheaper, smaller army that was easier to control. On the economic front, the debased currency of the empire, solidus, was replaced with a gold coinage of higher fineness, commonly called the hyperprion. The empire experienced a revival in mosaic art, built many new churches and fortifications, and annually hosted fairs and jousting tournaments. Then came Manuel I, who, much like Justinian, was energetic and ambitious, waging wars constantly. In 1167, Hungary was defeated at the Battle of Sirmium and forced to become a vassal of the empire. In Italy, Manuel first supported Conrad III of Germany against the Normans, and then the Pope in his conflict with the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Frederick Barbarossa. He also fought wars against the Seljuks, pushing all the way to their capital of Iconium. Although largely successful, his wars drained the treasury in return for small gains and created many enemies abroad and at home. Manuel placated the merchant republics of Venice, Genoa,
Yeah, that's it, man. Sooner or later, that money gonna run dry for all those wars. Sooner or later. You know what I mean? Unless somebody has come up with a system so that they could keep draining the people. And they could keep the military going. Sounds kind of familiar. But it'll take its toll if the people keep working and they keep being endless wars and there's no real gain from those endless wars. I think that's where using spirituality comes into it, you know. It's a greater good for the heavenly powers and stuff like that. That's easier to say than to tell somebody, well, after the war you will be rich and you will be this or you will be that. That's not guaranteed. So that's why religion as a whole is really good, because you get that unseen faith, that faith that they believe in something and something is going to happen, you know. They don't really know, and there's no real proof of it going to happen, but they believe. That's a lot easier to control than, you know, mere politics. Anyway, let's keep going here.
Amalfi and Pisa, giving them extensive privileges in return for naval and political support. The rich trade republics bought their way into power, built large estates, and treated the local populace as second-class citizens, which aggravated the denizens of Constantinople, who despised the Latins. When Manuel died in 1180, he was succeeded by his 11-year-old son, Alexius II. But in reality, his Latin mother, Maria, the daughter of the Crusader Prince of Antioch, Raymond of Poitiers, ruled as regent. Right away, she betrothed her son to the 10-year-old daughter of Louis VII, Agnes of France, and even gave more privileges
She betrothed
to
him.
merchants, as the empire was now being attacked by Bela III of Hungary in the west and the Seljuk Turks in the east. Maria turned to her unlikely allies, the Pope and Saladin, but by that time it was too late.
Oh, excuse me.
Maria Komnenian, the emperor's half-sister, and her husband John were worried that Maria would continue her husband's pro-Latin policies, and they were the ones asking Hungary to attack. In 1182, they invited the exiled rebellious cousin of Manuel, Andronikos, to the capital. The latter sent his guards through the gates of Constantinople and urged the citizens to take justice into their own hands. Years of frustrations against the Catholics erupted in one of the most violent and bloody moments in the city's history, as tens of thousands of Latins were slaughtered in the quarters given to them. The mob even cut off the head of the papal legate, Cardinal John. The 4,000 Westerners who barely survived the carnage were sold off to the Seljuks as slaves. Andronikos quickly turned on Maria Komnenian and her husband, poisoning them. The usurper then forced the 13-year-old Alexius to sign the execution of his mother and proclaim him as co-emperor in front of the city crowd. Afterwards, Alexius was strangled, and the 65-year-old Andronikos married his betrothed Agnes of France, who was just 12.
The blood clot of one
The
there.
emperor wanted to undo the reforms of his predecessors, which were somewhat justified as they had now spiraled out of control and led to an unprecedented level of corruption. Andronikos forbade the sale of offices, appointed new and fair tax collectors, brutally punished corrupted officials, and reconciled with the Venetians, restoring trade relations disrupted by the killing of the Latins in 1182. While the people in the provinces enjoyed these new changes, The aristocracy and the populace of Constantinople, who were subjected to this new tyrannical government, quickly began conspiring against him. The city and the province of
Oh, tyrannical government. Didn't he like? Wasn't he like spreading it around a little bit or something like that? Or am I reading this wrong here? You know, because it seems like the aristocracy is the ones complaining. You know, they getting the shorter end of the stick. You know.
Philadelphia rebelled, but was then crushed, while Cyprus and Serbia made their own attempts to break off, which were successful. Srem, Zara, Zemun, Belgrade, Branicevo, Nis and Serdica were all seized by the joint Serbian-Hungarian army of Bela III and Stefan Nemanja with little to no resistance, and Regisa, which was previously the vassal of Constantinople, was forced to pledge allegiance to the Norman King of Sicily, William II. All of this happened in 4 separate campaigns, none of which saw a single pitched battle. The Byzantine army was paralyzed and in disarray. That same Norman king led an invasion against the Eastern Roman Empire on both land and sea, at the head of a massive army alongside a pretender who claimed to be Alexius II. He first conquered Dyrrhachium and the Ionian Islands in June of 1185, and then marched on the Egnatia road to Thessaloniki unopposed, reaching it in August. At the same time, a fleet of 200 ships arrived under the walls of Thessaloniki. The great city was taken during the final assault in late August, which led to a brutal sack where 7,000 people died.
Wow.
On September 11th, 1185, while the emperor was absent from the capital, a popular uprising put a new candidate on the imperial throne, Isaac II Angelos. This caught Andronikos by surprise, and after he was captured, Isaac decided to let the mob deal with him. For 3 days, the former emperor was tied to a post and beaten. Then, the old emperor was executed in a horrific fashion, which marked the bloody end of the Komnenos dynasty, which both centralized and exhausted the state. Isaac II immediately turned his attention to the west and launched a campaign against the Norman invaders. A momentous event happened sometime during the campaign, as while the emperor was at camp, he granted audience to 2 brothers whose names were Asen and Theodore, who offered their help against the Normans in return for autonomy over territory in the Haemus Mountains. In response, the emperor's uncle, John Ducas, commanded a eunuch to slap the more insolent of the 2 in front of the emperor and sent them on their way back north. The conquest of Thessaloniki opened the road to Constantinople, but an army led by the general Alexius Vranus won 2 victories at Mosynopolis and then decisively on November 7th, 1185 at Demetrices, largely due to the fact that the Norman soldiers lost discipline after extensive looting. Despite the fact that the Byzantines defeated the Norman land forces and retook most of the territory lost, the Norman navy continued to wreak havoc in the eastern Mediterranean and crushed a force sent by Isaac II to retake Cyprus. While Byzantium was busy with rebels and invaders from all sides, the 2 brothers, previously insulted by the emperor's servant, rebelled against the crown in one of history's most elaborate propaganda campaigns. The region of the Haemus Mountains, centered around the well-defended fortress of Tarnovo, was a multi-ethnic area with a mixed population made out of Bulgarians, Blacks, Cumans and Pechenegs, as well as other semi-nomadic people driven out from the steppe. The brothers were most likely Blacks, but to build a state, they tapped into Bulgarian heritage and culture, which not only endured, but flourished during 167 years of Byzantine control. Up to this point, the rich cattle herders of these lands were not directly involved in any conflict and remained loyal to Constantinople. To spread the flames of rebellion, the brothers rebranded themselves in the image of the great Bulgarian Tsars, changing their names from Fyodor and Asen to Peter and Ivan Asen, with Peter crowning himself with a golden wreath, wearing red boots, and claiming the throne for himself. Next, they took advantage of the recent sack of Thessaloniki, telling their supporters that the patron saint of the city, Saint Demetrius, had abandoned it and bestowed his blessing upon Tarnovo instead. One of his icons, taken by the Normans, made its way to the city and was placed in a hastily built wooden church. Peter and Asen declared their rebellion on his feast day of October 26, 1185, which was an important date in the calendar of all Orthodox Christians in the Balkans. Finally, they brought in soothsayers, who were people suffering from epilepsy, but regarded as prophets, who told tales that additionally inspired people to rise up in rebellion. As the propaganda campaign was picking up speed, Isaac II levied a new tax that fell heavily on the people of the region, especially on the coastal cities of Varna and Ankylos, to pay for the wedding to the Hungarian princess, which was part of the terms of the peace he concluded with Bela III in order to secure the West. Bulgarian minor nobles, the boyars, were already aggravated due to losing their positions to the Byzantine aristocrats, and this tax pushed them to defect to the rebel cause. However, the rebellion lacked the means to take many of the nearby fortresses, including the old Bulgarian capital of Preslav, and quickly turned to raiding Thrace and gathering more support. Desperate for new allies, Isaac II offered the hand of his sister Theodora to Conrad of Montferrat, an ally of Manuel I, who distinguished himself fighting against Frederick Barbarossa in Italy in 1179. On his wedding day, he was also awarded the rank of Caesar. Shortly after, Alexius Vranus, the man who had crushed the Norman threat, was emboldened by his victories and the support of his men, who proclaimed him emperor in his native city of Adrianople. From there, he marched on Constantinople.
And everything is just fractioning off, you know. Emperor here, Tsar here, Prince here. It's just like organized chaos going on here. It's hard to keep up with all of this stuff. But it's quite interesting, I could tell you that. Everybody is jockeying for position. You know, there's propaganda wars going on, you know, and every sector of that continent has got a little battle going on or something. You know what I mean? That's kind of crazy. There's just so much of a mix of people in that little area there. It's a little area, but you know what I'm saying.
Constantinople in the spring of 1187 and attempted to take the city. Despite some initial success, he was unable to breach the strong city defenses, when suddenly Conrad rallied the defenders and sallied out with his Latin force. Alexius spotted the man and rushed over in an attempt to kill the enemy leader, but lost the jewel and his head. The rebellion was over, and Conrad was a hero, but in the end he chose to board a Genoese ship and seek out more glory in the Holy Land, where he would play a key role in the Third Crusade. Vranus was a popular general among the local populace, so his killing by Conrad only exacerbated the animosity between the Latins and the Greeks. With the Vranus rebellion dealt with, Isaac II was ready to put an end to the raids of the north and marched against the Vlacho-Bulgarian rebels. The Byzantine astronomers knew that a total solar eclipse would happen on September 4th, 1187. So Isaac used that to his advantage and attacked the moment the darkness set in. The unsuspecting rebels were decisively routed and forced to retreat north of the Danube. The emperor then took the capital with ease, taking Asen's wife Helen and brother Kalyan hostage, as well as recovering the icon of the patron saint. He then moved his army west to besiege Lübeck, but this siege failed after 3 months. Despite the fact that the campaign was a military and symbolic victory, Angelos failed to capitalize on it, since he left no garrison in Tarnovo, which the brothers quickly recovered with the help of their new Cuman allies. This forced Isaac to sign a peace treaty that recognized the establishment of the Second Bulgarian Tsardom, but the hostilities were far from over. The emperor took this time to uphold the promises of his predecessor towards the Venetians, and even expanded their rights in return for their obedience. The Doge was named the most loyal servant of the emperor, the Venetians, regarded as Romans, and forced to aid the empire when called upon, in return for paying no tariffs when trading in all
This
of
is
its
crazy.
ports. 2 years later, in 1189, the Venetian quarter was expanded by incorporating the smaller French and German quarters in the city in a treaty that named the trade ports Venice had free access to, one that would become the foundation of the partition of the Eastern Roman Empire 15 years later. On October 2nd, 1187, Saladin took over Jerusalem, which triggered the Third Crusade. Isaac II made an alliance with him to counterbalance Frederick Barbarossa, whose budding diplomacy with the Seljuk Turks was worrisome. After gathering at the initial starting point of Regensburg, the Crusaders passed Hungarian and Serbian lands, where they were treated with hospitality, and the Serbian ruler, Stefan Nemanja, proposed a coalition against Isaac, along with the new Bulgarian state, who Serbia initially assisted. Frederick refused and sent envoys to Isaac. Unfortunately, the emperor was fighting against another pretender to the throne, Theodore Mankiewicz of Philadelphia, and his courtiers didn't think of anything better than taking the envoys hostage, which started a limited war between the Holy Roman and Eastern Roman empires. The
Misunderstanding?
Crusader journey in Byzantine lands was a series of hit-and-run attacks on their baggage train by Cuman, Vlach, Bulgarian, Serbian, and Greek detachments. When captured, many admitted that they were acting on the orders of the emperor. Mountain passes were blockaded, and the cities of Serdica and Philippopolis were found evacuated with their defenses torn down. Meanwhile, Peter and Asen also sent a proposal to Barbarossa, pledging their support and fealty if he would attack their common enemy. An offer that Frederick seriously considered as he wintered at Adrianople for 3 months. From there, he wrote to his son to gather a fleet of ships to aid in the capture of Constantinople, but that plan never panned out. In February of 1190, the Crusaders clashed with a Vlacho-Cuman mercenary company hired by Byzantium and soundly defeated them near Arcadiopolis. Shortly after this defeat, Isaac II sent terms and concluded a treaty allowing the Crusaders past the strait free of charge. That same year, the Crusaders and the Seljuks of Rum would collide at the Battle of Iconium. Barbarossa was victorious and continued towards the Holy Land, which meant that neither him nor the Seljuks would trouble Isaac for the time being. Taking advantage of the...
So, from what I'm gathering here, the Crusades is pretty much people on their way to the Holy Land, but cleaning up and taking as much as they can on the way there. Maybe that's a simplistic view of it, but that's what it seems like that's happening here to me, you know what I mean? They came from the top and they just coming through, do some politics and some politicking and thing to get through certain areas where they wouldn't have to fight or do anything like that. And others, they just run ramshot through them. All on their way to the Holy City. That's crazy.
The absence of any Byzantine army, the Serbians sacked Skopje and occupied the region between Branicevo and Nis, but Isaac decided to deal with the fledgling Bulgarian state first. A major expedition was launched in July 1190, landing in Mesembria and heading straight to Preslav and Tarnovo, while enduring the typical guerrilla tactics employed by the locals. While preparing to capture Strinivos, a spy sent from Ivan Asen convinced Isaac II that a new Cuman wave was south of the Danube, ready to cut him off. The emperor decided to move through the narrow Trievna Pass to avoid being stuck between two forces. The giant baggage train stretched for kilometers, and the army was divided into 3 groups. The vanguard, commanded by the emperor's cousin, Manuel I, and by his son-in-law, the Sebastokrator, Isaac Komnenos. The main body of the army, under the command of the emperor and his brother, the Sebastokrator Alexios Angelos, and the rearguard, commanded by the emperor's uncle, John Ducas, the man who slapped Asen in the face. Knowing exactly when and where the enemy would be, Ivan Asen positioned his troops around the pass and allowed the vanguard to go through it. and then attacked the main corps under direct imperial command. Isaac could not deploy his troops. Once the battle ensued, the pinned Roman soldiers were showered with arrows and boulders from above. In order to get out alive, Isaac II's bodyguards had to cut through his own soldiers after he was injured and lost his helm. The Vlachs and the Bulgarians captured parts of the imperial treasury, including many religious relics. Upon learning about the attack, the rearguard used another pass, probably Shipka, through which John Ducas escaped. Yet another ambush that decimated the army and supplied the Bulgarians with weapons, armor, funds, morale, and above all, legitimacy. What followed was a whirlwind of conquests that included Varna, Ankylos, Serdica, Nis, all the way to Stob. And what was up until now a dual leadership from two brothers, with Peter at the helm, shifted, with Ivan Asen I being the leading figure because of the military triumph. Back in Constantinople, Isaac II disguised his failure as a victory and energetically launched a new campaign against Serbia, crushing them somewhere on the Morava in 1191. There he accepted Stefan Nemanja as ruler of the region, as long as he was his vassal, forcing him to abandon all agreements with the Bulgarian brothers, and began contemplating a new attack, this time with the aid of Bela III, who would invade from the north, before Bulgaria could obtain the power and status it once had. In 1192, the emperor appointed one of his cousins, Constantine Ducas Angelos, as strategos, and gave him Philippopolis. That man proved his worth by securing several major victories and returning Thrace into the fold. Like many before him, his successes on the battlefield and the support of his men encouraged Constantine, who rose up in rebellion against Isaac. But when he wrote to his brother-in-law, who controlled Adrianople, to join his cause, he was refused, and the same supporters handed him over to the emperor, making his rebellion short-lived. With the capable defender now out of the picture, the Bulgarian raids resumed in 1194, now even more deadly thanks to the assistance of Cuman allies. Isaac II responded by bringing in Alexius Giddos from Asia Minor with fresh troops, combined with those of the west. That force was annihilated in Archidiopolis, which was very close to Constantinople, and pushed the border between the two entities to the Rhodope Mountains. Two expeditionary forces were sent to counterattack, both leading to a mutiny of the soldiers, who feared that their commanders would lead them to yet another mountain pass ambush. By this point, Isaac II was fed up with this small spark that only included Tarnovo and its countryside, which grew out of control. So he turned to Bela III and prepared for a massive invasion on two fronts. In March 1195, the emperor left the capital and gathered his force in Rodosto, where he received reports that there was a plot to put his brother on the throne. However, Isaac refused to believe that his brother would betray him. This was a mistake, as soon Alexius III proclaimed himself the emperor, blinding and imprisoning his brother and putting yet another campaign to a halt, which allowed the Bulgarians to press towards Melnik and Seris. Two new armies under two new commanders were sent against Bulgaria, both armies defeated and their...
It's crazy what power does, man. Power will smash up a family. You know, one brother or whoever would think everything is cool, and then boom, you know, you crush him, take power. That's just crazy, man.
Commanders captured. However, what seems to have been the greatest triumph of the new state quickly turned into a tragedy, as before the army reached Tarnovo, a Bulgarian noble killed Ivan Asen I. However, by that time, the Second Bulgarian Tsardom was firmly established and became a major player in the region. The constant internal and external wars, raids, and changes in leadership were actually the calm before the storm, if we think about the events that followed them. That storm would soon strike Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. Our series will continue soon, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see the next video in the series. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing.
Yes, more to come. Action's gonna be picking up, I guess, coming up and thing, link for this video in the description. Go click on it so you could watch it without me babbling and cutting it off every once in a while to talk. But you know what I mean, Kings and Generals, man, great channel. Go check them out. You know what I mean. They got a lot of good stuff there. Most of you already know, but for those who don't, really good channel if you're into history stuff. Even if you're not into history, you're just into storytelling, boom, check them out. All right. Thank you all for watching this with me, man. You know what I mean? I really enjoy this series here. I'm really enjoying this series here, I could tell you that. Hope you guys enjoying it too. And in the meantime, hope you're taking care of each other, all right? Take care of yourself, just taking care of each other. And we all going to live in cool runnings.